For nearly a century, the United States dollar has been more than just money. It's been power, it's been influence, and for the rest of the world, it's been the system itself. But what if that system is beginning to crumble? What if the almighty dollar, the foundation of modern global power, is standing on shaky ground? This is the untold story of how the dollar rose to rule the world, and why that rule may be coming to an end. Let's rewind to the ashes of World War II. Europe was destroyed, currencies collapsed, gold reserves vanished. In 1944, world leaders gathered in a quiet mountain town called Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Their goal? To rebuild the global economy and prevent another Great Depression. There, one currency stood tall, the US dollar. Backed by gold, backed by victory, backed by trust. The deal was simple. Every major currency would be tied to the dollar, and the dollar itself would be tied to gold at $35 an ounce. The world needed stability. America offered it, and from that day on, the dollar wasn't just American, it was global. For the next 25 years, the system thrived. The US became the world's banker, and the dollar became the oxygen of global trade. But there was a problem. By the 1960s, America was spending heavily on wars, on social programs, on everything that projected its power. Gold was leaving the country faster than it came in. Confidence started to fade. And then, in 1971, President Richard Nixon made a decision that would change history. He ended the gold standard. From that moment, the dollar was backed by nothing. No gold, no silver, no tangible asset, only faith. Faith in the United States government. It was a monumental gamble, but it worked for a while, because something else happened. In the 1970s, the US struck a quiet deal with Saudi Arabia. America would protect the kingdom, and in return, Saudi oil and all OPEC oil would be sold exclusively in dollars. That agreement created the petrodollar system, and it locked the world into a cycle that would define the next 50 years. If you wanted oil, you needed dollars. And to get dollars, you needed to trade with or borrow from the United States. It was brilliant. Every barrel of oil sold reinforced the dollar's dominance, and every nation's need for energy meant an endless demand for American currency. But as America grew stronger, it also grew comfortable. It printed more money, imported more goods, outsourced more manufacturing, and built its prosperity on the idea that the dollar would always be trusted. Meanwhile, the rest of the world was changing. China rose from isolation to become a manufacturing giant. Europe built its own currency, the euro. Russia rediscovered its oil wealth, and developing nations began asking a dangerous question. Why should the US control the money we use? Fast forward to today. The cracks are becoming impossible to ignore. As of late 2025, the US national debt has crossed $38 trillion. That's more than the value of the entire American economy. And to keep things running, Washington prints more money every year, turning the dollar itself into a product of political convenience. During the pandemic, the Federal Reserve injected trillions into the economy. It saved Wall Street, but it also unleashed the highest inflation in 40 years. And while prices rose, so did global skepticism. If America can print unlimited money, why should the rest of the world keep using it? Enter BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Together, they've launched their own initiatives to trade without the dollar. They're buying gold, building payment networks, even exploring digital currencies that bypass the Western financial system entirely. In 2023, the dollar made up just 58% of global reserves, the lowest in modern history, and that number continues to fall. So what's really at stake? This isn't just about money. It's about power. For decades, the US has used the dollar like a weapon. Countries that challenged its dominance, Iran, Russia, Venezuela, were hit with sanctions, cut off from the global banking system, and left economically paralyzed. But that strategy may have backfired. Nations watched what happened. They saw how easily the US could freeze bank accounts, block transactions, and cripple entire economies with the click of a button. And so, quietly, they began to build a world that doesn't depend on the dollar anymore. China is trading oil with Saudi Arabia in yuan. Russia sells energy to India in rubles. Even Europe has discussed alternative payment systems for global trade. The message is clear. The world is preparing for life after the dollar. Now, let's talk about what that future might look like. If the dollar were to lose its global status, it wouldn't vanish overnight. It would erode slowly, piece by piece. But the consequences would be enormous. Imports to the US would become far more expensive. Interest rates would surge. The government's debt would spiral. And the American consumer, the heartbeat of the global economy, would face a brutal awakening. Because the truth is, the dollar's dominance has allowed the US to live beyond its means for decades, to spend, print, and borrow without paying the real price. And when that privilege ends, so does the illusion of endless prosperity. But here's where things get even more interesting. As the old system fades, a new one is already emerging. Digital currencies. Central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, are being rolled out worldwide. China's e-yuan, Europe's digital euro. Even the US is testing its own digital dollar. The idea sounds efficient. Instant payments, no cash, total control. But for many, it's a chilling vision. A future where money is no longer owned, but permitted. If digital currencies replace cash, then every transaction could be monitored, approved, or denied. Money would no longer be freedom. It would be data. And whoever controls that data controls the world. This is where the story of the dollar connects to something much bigger. The battle for the future of global finance itself. In the 20th century, power was defined by who had gold. In the 21st, by who had oil. But in the next century, it may be defined by who controls information. The US dollar once symbolized economic trust, but in a world where algorithms make decisions and artificial intelligence moves markets, that trust is shifting from nations to networks. So where does that leave the dollar? Still powerful, still dominant, but no longer untouchable. It's a king with challengers. An empire facing the slow erosion of its influence. And while the collapse won't happen overnight, the direction is clear. The dollar's best days are behind it. Yet there's a final twist. Even as the world moves away from the dollar, it still depends on it. Because when markets crash, when economies panic, and when investors lose faith, they still run back to the dollar. Not because they trust America, but because they trust the system they helped create. It's a paradox that has kept the dollar alive longer than anyone expected. And it's why, even as its power fades, its shadow will linger for decades to come. In the end, the fall of the dollar isn't just about currency. It's about control, about what happens when one nation's money becomes everyone's problem. And when that system finally changes, the entire world will feel it, in their savings, in their debt, in their freedom. The dollar built the modern world. But like all empires, its reign will one day end. The only question is, who or what will rise to replace it? So, what do you think? Is the fall of the dollar inevitable? Or will the US reinvent itself once again? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into money, power, and the hidden systems that shape our lives, subscribe to Wealth Untold.